post. That's why I think. Oh, there you go.
Okay.
Sorry.
Someone done it for me?
Looks like it.
Okay. So now we have people coming in, I guess. So whilst people do, I do have a question for you guys. A surprise question and an important one. But today it is World Book Day. You celebrate that in the States?
Yeah, reading day.
You called it Reading Day?
Yeah.
So all the kids here pretty much have gone into school today dressed as, their favorite book character. So I put it to you. If I'd have said to you guys, you got to come dressed as your favorite character today from a storybook in the webinar, which one would you have chosen?
I haven't had enough coffee yet to answer that question.
Oh, come on. One must have just come and just.
Cat in the Hat.
Cat in the Hat. That's a great one. I love that story. I love reading that sort of story. It's such a good tongue twister. There's such good rhymes as well. Graham?
I mean, I wish I had a good answer for you. I'm like such a nerd when it comes to reading. I don't care for fiction very much. I'm like,
Yeah, I read a lot of nonfiction too, like biographies and stuff. So it's hard for me to say.
Fair enough. All right. Well, Graham, I'm going to let you go with Ted Lasso, which I don't believe is a book, but it would have been written as a script, and I'm going to take that because you just so rock. You absolutely. Have you seen Ted Lasso?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So the third season's on its way.
It's funny. I historically have gotten Hopper from Stranger Things, the show Stranger Things.
Like David Harbour. You look like David Harbour.
Yeah, David Harbour is what I was getting
Yes.
for. Then Ted Lasso became popular, and so I just think it's just whichever is the most popular person with a mustache is who. So right now it's Ted Lasso for sure.
I just think you're a really good mix of the both. All right, it's 2 minutes past, so hopefully whoever's wanting to be here will have joined. So what we're here for, folks, what we're here for today, what we're talking about, we are chatting about getting our teams to achieve more in a tough climate, right? It's been years at growing at all costs, maybe with little attention on the cost. Throw in a pandemic, throw in a war, throw in rising interest rates, limiting options now on raising capital. And we've got a bit of a concoction that's caused many companies to slow down, many companies to lose customers they may not have forecasted to. I know we have. People, they've lost people they hadn't forecasted to, and it's not easy. And Graham, actually, I was snooping yesterday on your LinkedIn. Don't know if you noticed. And you'd shared the webinar link and someone had put in, I don't think we're in a recession, something to this effect. I don't think we're in a recession. I think we're in a tech session. What was your reaction to that?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. It's an interesting concept, and I have had these conversations with with my mom recently. So she was a lifetime school psychologist, worked in school districts, and she said, and my brother got laid off, and he worked in tech as well. He's a senior software engineer, so I'm sure he'll be fine. But my mom called me panicking. She was like, I don't get it. Why are they doing all these layoffs when a lot of things seem to be going well and employment is at an all-time low? And I think that the idea of this tech session is that we're a little microcosm. Tech is this little microcosm, and we think about it as if it is the world, because so much of our everyday lives are impacted by tech. But the number of people who own an iPhone versus the number of people who work at Apple, the number of people who use Google every day versus the number of people who work at Alphabet, they're incredibly different. And so for us, we hear about these tech firms, we hear about FANG or whatever the acronym is here or there so much, and a layoff at Google is going to be talked about a lot more than we're at a record low unemployment right now, at least in the States. And so the idea of this tech session is tech is not the economy is not tech. It is a small microcosm of,
despite what we think.
Exactly. Despite what everybody is on here and maybe everybody on the line thinks. So I think that's the idea of this tech session is tech is kind of it can be a bellwether, but it also can just be a an extreme version of everything. So it's like, oh, well, tech hired like crazy last year. They were offering ridiculous salaries, all this stuff in 2021, 2022. And then it's like, oh, well, I don't know if I'm supposed to curse. Oh, shoot. We need to cut drastically. Whereas the rest of the economy is kind of like, maybe a little bit of up and a little bit of down. So that's what I thought of when
I like it. I felt similar. And this is a good way to head up what we're up to today. So we obviously know what your mum does, which is useful for everyone. But let's just take a moment just to quickly introduce yourselves round. Let's start with you, Graham, as you've already kicked off. Tell everyone who's here, who you are, where you come from.
Absolutely. So I work at a company called Quota, as you can tell here and also here. And I was going to wear a Quota shirt, but I don't have one because I'm traveling right now. So normally I'm in the great state of Maine, which those of you who are not from the US, test your geography skills, but I'm currently in our Austin, Texas office. So I'm running the sales team at Quota. We're a commission tracking platform. So companies use Quota to track how much their reps can earn, get everybody on the same page, everybody from sales, finance, rev ops, everybody. And I'm currently running our sales team, but my title is chief of staff. So I've done all kinds of different things at the company, done sales, marketing, rev ops, some finance, scary enough, some product, scary enough. No engineering, but everything else.
To come, there's still time. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, so I am the founder and coach of a company called Sales Psyche. We work with sales and commercial teams to create healthier and high-performing minds without the burnout, really. So my focus is all around mindset and mental health piece. I've been in sales my whole career, struggled a lot with anxiety when I first started, which led me down this curious route, and a big passion of mine now bringing up this topic and making people more aware of it from a preventative and proactive piece.
Amen. Someone that has experienced the anxiety path, hats off to you. And yourself, Jason?
Yes, Jason William. I'm based in Philadelphia on the East Coast of the United States. Work for a company called Cision. We're a big public relations company, PR Newswire, amongst other products that we sell. I'm the director of sales enablement for Cision. Been in enablement for 14 years. This is my first, job with a software company. Prior to this, I worked for med tech companies like Abbott, Philips, and Siemens Healthcare. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for coming. Thank you all for joining us. I know one of the things that struck me as I was considering how this might run today was this tagline that we've used in promoting it, which was doing more with less, this idea of doing more with less in this sort of tougher time. And I sort of had a bit of a struggle with it because I associated it with doing more. I've got more, like this idea of more. We always have to do more and more and more. And then I stood back from it and I was like, okay, people are losing people, things are tougher. We don't necessarily have to think that everything means more revenue, more numbers. And I started to wonder what I might define as more for us. And I wanted to know how you guys react to that, what that makes you think. What does more mean to you, Jason, when we think about more with less?
Well, I think when you think about more, from an enablement perspective, the team that I have, we're tasked with doing a lot more, onboarding new hires, helping them, get better with their selling skills. But then conversely, we're asked we have less to work with tech stack wise, right? Different platforms we're using, but also maybe from a budgetary perspective. So we have all this stuff we have to do, but we have this much to use. So it's become more and more difficult. And I think the task becomes, you have to become more creative and work smarter, not harder.
Okay, so it's more creative, more resourceful.
Yeah, you got to become very resourceful, but also not stress out your team. That's expected to deliver, these trainings you have to do for a large sales team.
Understood. I bet you've seen a bit of that, surely, Chris, instead of stressed out teams. What does more mean for you?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think the first thing is being more mindful of where you spend not just your time, but your energy, and how you protect and manage that and recharge it as well. And also how you can be more resilient. I think that's one of those words that has been thrown out in the last couple of years. And it's almost like you just tell people you've just got to be resilient, but it's not just a simple switch. It's like it's about as useful as telling someone to calm down. It doesn't work. It does the opposite
Oh
effect.
God, especially don't say that to
A
a
lot of the time.
5-year-old. Nightmare.
No, exactly.
Absolute
So-
nightmare telling my child
Don't
to
say
calm
it, don't tell
down.
it to a salesperson either. They hate that word.
No,
No.
exactly. I think it's these flippant words can be thrown out. Just be more resilient, be more confident, have a positive mindset, but they're just statements that don't really help. So I think it's understanding how to be more mindful and more resilient and diving into that, because those are the tools that are going to help you in this environment. I think that statement in itself, more with less, can almost create a bit of a fear mongering straight away and unnecessarily as well. I think it's just being more adaptable rather than doing more with less.
I think, Shelley, one thing I would ask, maybe put it back on you, is from a tech stack owner, what are you seeing from people like us coming to you saying we want to work with you, but we have less to work with?
Yeah, we're seeing a few things around that. I mean, I think one thing that has forced us to do is be more flexible, is to remember that this period of time is just a chapter. And I've been through this once before. And one of the things I took from it then was this idea that we need to sort of become less rigid. I know as sales leaders and salespeople, we really love the process and the machine and it being really nice and predictable. But actually, it can be really to our fault. It can really falter us. And I think, one of the things we've talked about is being more flexible. So we've talked about how can we be more accommodating? These people we want to work with, they've got these goals, things they want to hit. One thing, I spoke to a sales enablement leader not that long ago, Jason, who's desperate to hear how their new messaging is landing. They've had to change their messaging to fit the new market. They want to know if it's working or not, but that's really hard with 100 sales reps and no way of capturing that data. Also in a position where they haven't got the money, but haven't got the money right now. How can we talk about this in terms of a partnership over years rather than we do a 1-year contract, so when's your budget up? And I think we need to be more flexible in how we're thinking and be more empathetic to who we work with, who we're working with.
Yeah, and on that point, for my sales team, this has been coming up a lot as well, where it's like, okay, well, this company really wants to work with us. And I think that it comes down to getting flexible and finding a win-win situation for both sides, for the customer and for the company. And so is that, they want to work with us, but budget is an issue. Okay, well, is it a cash flow issue? Okay, can we get creative on billing terms? Is it a issue of discounting? Okay, well, can we offer a multi-year contract? So finding some sort of win-win situation where let's make it, and this is the way that I always try to handle negotiations in any kind, is like, let's not just do you versus me. Let's both sit on the same side of the table and it's you and me against the problem. And in this case, it's often the problem being, let's find a way to work together. And so what is it going to take, and where are the issues? Is it, our budget got slashed? Okay, well, did the budget get slashed because you can't spend right now because of the uncertainty? Or I had somebody the other day say, well, I can't sign a 12-month agreement. And I said, okay, what is it? Like, is it the fact that it's the duration of 12 months? They're like, yeah, we're not able to sign a 12-month agreement. And so I was like, and now this is kind of cheating, but I was like, okay, well, why don't we sign a 6-month agreement? And I'll give you 6 months for free. And we will then, charge slightly above list price. Still fits within our budgetary restrictions of discounting, but also fits the restriction on not signing a 12-month agreement. And so it ends up getting the same outcome with or a better outcome for both sides.
I was gonna say, one thing I could really, I can give you a recent experience from my perspective. Since the last time we spoke, we have a pretty deep tech stack. And so we're doing some renewals as we speak. And I was tasked with looking at tech stacks, how many licenses we have, who's really using it versus not using it, and then have to go back to the vendors and say, listen, I said, we have X number of licenses, but only X number of people are using it. So while we want to keep your business, we have to decrease our business because we just can't keep spending money on X number of licenses that aren't being used. And so we're trying to work within confines of a reduced budget, but while trying to keep the tech stack.
And so I guess, how could we use that information in a practical way, Jason? Like from a sales leadership point of view, you're sitting on that side of the fence holding the tech budget. You've got multiple tools already. You're coming at this sort of almost from like protecting revenue. Like what could we take from that that we could do something about it to be more useful?
Well, I don't know if it's about protecting revenue. I was actually trying to protect the tech stack to keep them being taken away from us because we need them. From a sales enablement perspective, that's like they're on like members of my team, and that helps us keep the enablement going. So what I had to do was show value, but also say, you know what, if we decrease this, we're going to save X number of dollars, which is a win for us. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
We didn't get rid of it. We just said, you know what, these people aren't using it. They're not going to miss it. So we're just going to remove them. Keep these people on there using it. We're going to save this much money. And then from a C-suite level perspective, as I'm selling up to my team, you're like, oh, we're going to save money so we can keep it.
Yeah, and I have a very specific example from our company where we had a customer come to us and say, like, unfortunately, we don't have the budget to continue in 2023. Digging into it more, it was like, we were like, okay, well, you know, is there zero budget? And they were like, well, no, it's we're actually looking at some competitors because we want to save some money. And there are some competitors out there that are, you know, discount versions, speaking of competitors. And as we dug into it, we were like, well, what, like, where is the actual pain that QuotaPath is solving? And it's it's commission tracking, it's commission calculating, and they had, you know, whatever, 100 users. I don't remember the specific, but like 100 users. And as we dug into it, it's like, okay, their AE team was on there, their SDR team, their account management team, their CSM team. Well, where is the actual pain? Okay, the actual pain is calculating the commissions for the AEs, the SDRs and the account managers. But yet they had, you know, 25 CSMs on there as well. And that was actually a pretty straightforward, pretty easy process for them. So we were able to preserve some of the revenue. Instead of a complete customer churn, we were able to preserve 75% or whatever. And then we tacked in, okay, well, if you renew for 2 years and we split billing, it brings it down even further. And we were able to actually get down to a situation that was a win-win because they continued using a tool, because obviously ripping out a tool and replacing it is a painful experience, as Jason probably knows, as everybody knows. And so we were able to preserve a portion of that, well over half of that revenue.
So leading on from that, Graham, like I was reading, I think it was Pavilion, it was another company, what was it? Ebster, I think Pavilion, I think it was Ebster. And they released some research, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, around what they're seeing in sales. And none of it was a surprise, to be honest. It was just a more advanced version of what we've already seen. Oh, the sales cycles are increasing again. And oh, now it's not 10 stakeholders, it's 12 stakeholders. It's, you know, just going up. One thing, though, that it made me reflect on after was there was something at the end that said something like, it's critical now more than ever that we play to our strengths. What does that mean to you? When I say we got to play to our strengths, how do you interpret that? What might have you done differently or changed in how you're running your sales team with that in mind?
Yeah, so we did a pretty extensive ICP analysis last year, kind of like the third quarter of last year, and identified, and for those online, I always use a lot of acronyms. ICP, ideal customer profile, your type of customer that is like the ideal buyer for you. So we did a lot of ICP analysis, and it's not just one thing. It's not just like, this is our ideal customer. We have 3 different components of it, and so we have people who are fit 1, fit 2, and fit all 3, total ICP, what have you. And so we did an in-depth analysis of this, and what it allowed us to do is rework our marketing on those. So look, we are going to focus on these ICP. They close substantially faster, they close quicker, they renew more, the average contract value is about the same. And so let's stick with those. And then, so we rework our marketing on it. And then we also rework the sales process specifically around these ICP customers. We spend more time preparing for these demos where it's an ICP customer. We spend more time like working these opportunities because we know that they have a higher likelihood of closing, higher likelihood of renewing. And so that when it comes to the playing to the strengths, that's what I see is like, play to where you know you can win, and don't waste your time right now trying to, let's go up market right now, or let's try to break into a new market. No, let's focus on where we know we can win and win those.
Totally. I mean, and I hope that there is stuff in there in what you've just said, because I'm sure most can relate to the world of, let's fill up the AE's day with demo after demo after demo. There's no time for prep. There's no time for like really good quality follow-up. And so the experience on both sides, I think, becomes just like a treadmill of another demo. I'm not really thinking about it. I'm just doing it. And what, as I always say to my team here, it is not what you sell that matters now. It is how you sell it. There is so many people out there doing stuff. It's not too dissimilar. It's got its USPs, it's got its things, but they've got choice. How you do things is so important. And I hope that learning there is something that we take away and we don't lose it as the numbers start to change again, maybe.
Yeah, because what you've seen actually is like, there's data that I was reading before this call about how revenue and quota attainments have dropped since 2019. And then you throw the pandemic on top of that, plus the economic factors and things that you mentioned, Shelley, and you see win rates are flat, you see pipeline down. And then, oh, by the way, you got to do more with less, not to, take away from what you're trying to say. So how do we leverage that strength, to your point? How do we make it so it's easier for folks? But also, I think maybe to hear from Chris on this, like from Psyche, but how do you do this so people don't get stressed out and they feel like they're under this insurmountable amount of pressure to perform when they can't? Because we keep taking things away from them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think it comes down to controllables and uncontrollables. I think is what it breaks down to. And I was chatting with Shelley about this the other day and saying that one of the words, I think self-talk is a big thing that comes into play here, and also what you communicate as a leader. But getting away from this language of being lucky or unlucky in sales as well is a big part of this, because I think the perception of being lucky can also discredit the work you've done, and also stop you from recognizing what you're doing in the situation, which is where imposter syndrome can come from. And this feeling of unlucky can almost put you into that state of being a victim, and that kind of hopelessness mindset of, oh, I'm unlucky, why me, which keeps you very static on things. Whereas I think there's no such thing as luck, and being unlucky, there's controllables and uncontrollables. And uncontrollables a lot of the time will be labeled as negative things, but they can also be positive things. It's far more empowering to recognize what can rather than, oh, I was unlucky with that deal, is, do you know what? Here's the controllable things that I didn't do, or here's the uncontrollable things that happened. And do you know what? That deal went well. Here's the things I did control, and here's the positive things I didn't control, but influence that situation. And I think the point of that being is that all we can focus on is what you can control. And in any sort of what you might call as a normal environment, there is so many variables, but even more so now, there are so many uncontrollables that I think it can be overwhelming when people almost convince themselves they should be able to do something. I often tell myself, the sooner you accept a wall is a wall, the less time and energy you spend trying to push it over. And really simply, in any situation, in any deal you're working on, or environment or territory or economy, is writing down and looking at what can I control, what can't I control, and then asking myself, where am I investing my energy? And that's the most important thing there. If I focus on what I can control, my process, then I'll get to that. If I spend and waste energy on things I can't, then I'm only going to feel more helpless from it.
On that, what you got me thinking about there was our role as leaders within that, right? Because if we're constantly, bashing our teams with, you got to hit this number, you got to hit this number, you got to hit this number, to a certain extent, that is out of they're controllables of the process, right? The end result right now is where there feels the uncertainty. And one of the things that we've done at Jiminy over the last few months is we've really reviewed from the BDR perspective how we manage that process and what that looks like. So if you think about it from the AE world, the AE is all about opportunity management, isn't it? You've got the key stages in your sales cycle, which is where your time and effort goes, and then the sale pops out or it doesn't. But in the BD world, as I've walked back into it again in the last sort of 5 months, it feels like it really sits on two sides. It's either activity, like drive numbers, calls, emails, and then meetings. But there's this whole raft of things that are happening in the middle that I almost think about as our own opportunity pipeline within the world of BD. but the attention that we've paid on it in the past has been very little. So, for example, now rather we forget about the activity; it's just out of our head now. What we focus on now is more around creation of referrals into new accounts, into engaged accounts. So almost created our own sort of, they're prospecting stages, but thinking of them like pipeline stages, and we target and focus on those. And so whilst the meeting and opportunity number right now is tougher, and it is, that bit in the middle is something we can still control and we can reward and recognize on. And so I think we have a duty to our teams as well to be mindful of that we're not asking, they are going to get stressed if day in and day out we're asking them of something that they can't possibly do, that's really, really challenging. I think we should ask ourselves that question. It did trigger something for me though, for you, Graham, in this as a sort of a commission expert. Can I label you that?
Sure, others have. So
oh, well, there you go then. It must be on your LinkedIn profile. So as a commission expert, one thing that I have been thinking about just in the last few days has been, you know, how do we think about rewarding? Is there a way of thinking about rewarding or commissioning differently in this environment where, you know, if the deals are slowing down, if the getting the ops created is slowing down for people, the end result of that for our teams is they might not be earning as much cash, which is obviously going to affect them. So how is that coming up? Am I just barking up a tree that's not there?
No, it's absolutely coming up. And there are a few things that I've seen recently. One thing going on the like controllables, uncontrollables, one thing you do have control over is when to give up on a deal and when to just cut your losses. And so I told my reps this week that I'd give them $20 for every deal they close lost.
No, you didn't.
And so, yeah, I was like,
I love it.
Like,
I love it. I'm going to do it
like
tomorrow.
Really when I ran about a 45-person SDR team at my last company, which was actually acquired by Recession, Jason's company, I had a stack of $2 bills sitting on my desk. And I just went to a bank. I got 100 $2 bills, which for those of you not in the States, it's a pretty rare bill. Like $2 bills aren't used ever. And so
it's sitting in a sock drawer right now, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, exactly. Like everybody always has like a couple of them. I have one in my wallet, like, and they're like, so anytime anybody got hung up on my team, I would give them a $2 bill. Like anytime they were in the middle of a pitch and somebody just straight up hung up on them, I would give them a $2 bill. And that's the like rewarding for something that is part of your job and sucks, but like never feels good. And so, yeah, if you got hung up on, you got a $2 bill. And so I just had a stack of 100 and I would go through probably, you know, not even one a day. People weren't hanging out. I was selling to PR professionals who are very cordial generally. Now I sell to salespeople who may not be, more likely to hang up on you. And so, yeah, there are these things that you can do. I was talking to a VP of sales over at HubSpot a while back, and she said that they're focused on micro wins within their comp plans. And so I was like, what do you mean by micro wins? She was like, look, I can't half everybody's quota. Like, I just can't do that right now. That'd be great for me if I could, because then people would be hitting their quotas, but I like that's just not something I can do. And so instead she created these micro wins. And so for a salesperson, instead she created a milestone bonus, where as soon as you hit 50% of your quota, you get an extra, whatever, $200 or something like that. I rolled out a spiff to my team where I said, look, this quarter, if you hit 110% of your quota, I'll give you a bonus. I'll give you $1,000 if you hit 110% of your quota. And so these small things where, that's not an insignificant amount of money, but these small things, these micro wins that you can add in to improve people's morale, to give them the cash, and again, it's not $20 for every closed lost opportunity, but maybe it will be. It clears out the pipeline. It allows you to focus on the deals that actually have a higher level of closing. I've talked to companies before who pay commission based on yes, you get the biggest chunk of commission when you close the deal, but you get commission for every demo you run. You get commission for every opportunity that moves into qualified. You get commission for every, each of the step along the way. Don't love that as a concept. You end up with poor data and people gaming the system and whatnot, but something to that effect on a short term, those micro wins, I do see those being successful for sure.
Do you like that idea, Jason? Oh, sorry, Chris, you were
I
going
was,
to say something.
I
Sorry.
was,
I'll let Jason go first. It's all right.
I was a sales rep back in the day when I first started my career in medical device, and you know, being internal now for over 14 years, is that the one thing that struck a chord with me, what Graham said, is that commission drives behavior. Good, bad, or indifferent, a spiff, or this or that, or other. When the minute you put money on the table and say this is for you to lose, they're not going to lose it. They're going to figure out a way to take it. So I was just agreeing with what Graham said. You know, commission drives behavior. I mean, that's how you're going to get someone to cross over the finish line. And whether it's decreasing quota or giving them a spiff to hit their quota, when you put money in front of them, they're going to find a way to get it.
It reminds me of a really great saying I love. It's on my LinkedIn somewhere. I'm going to try and find it before this is up and share it. Chris, what was you going to say? I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's fine. Andrew Huberman talks about this on one of his podcast episodes recently. I don't know if you've listened to him at all, but something called intermittent reward scheduling. And he talks about the idea is sometimes that if we automatically know we're going to get a reward at the end of something, that can almost decrease the motivation of it over time. And that sometimes putting in sort of intermittent reward scheduling is more effective, which is why gambling is so addictive to people, is because you don't know you're going to win every single time, but you do it, but it's doing it in a more healthier way than gambling, of course. Because of course, if you know every time I'm going to do this, I'm going to get this, as you say, like, you know, reps know every time I hit this number, I'm going to get commission, but people still miss their target. So but the idea, sort of going back to the question around, is targeting it on behaviors. So is actually going, how can you build, and I've seen some companies doing this already, which I work with around intermittent reward scheduling, is, you know, you'll occasionally reward things based on those behaviors, and you don't know what it will be. It might be, for example, it might be money related. It might be time with the CEO, for example. It might be something around like a L&D budget, or like something like taking care of their mental well-being, or so on. But you don't know when you're going to get it, but you have to be doing those things in order to be able to get it when it comes up. So it might come up at the end of a week. It might come up at the end of the month.
Yeah,
Intermittent scheduling.
Intermittent reward scheduling.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. That's not where I thought you were going to go. I thought you were going to go with the, like, yeah, you get a reward for every time. But I would actually do that with my SDR team for a period of time as well. I would just be like, hey, it's Friday. Anybody who has set 10 demos already this week, go home. You know, take the Friday off. And then it's like, oh, people who are at 8 are like, well, shit, I got to get up to 10 so that I can go home. But it rewards those people. And then, yeah, you're right, they don't know. And as somebody who spent last week in Las Vegas, I can understand the reward of, like, you know, hey, every once in a while you hit blackjack and you get 1.5 times the reward or what have you.
I know I was speaking to someone yesterday who he initially was saying every time he goes to the gym, he'll go into this lunch place, but it was kind of defeating the object a little bit, but also it was just a bit of a given. So what he does now, he carries a dice with him, and every time he goes to the gym, he then rolls the dice, and there's 3 different things on there of whether you just go home and cook some food, you get this, or you go to that place to get some food afterwards. And it said it adds so much more like excitement. And it's like, if I don't go to the gym, I'm never going to know. So it adds that kind of habit into him and has driven him to going regularly.
In January, I was trying to do dry January, but I told people that I couldn't do that. So I was going to do dryish January. And what that meant is that every time I wanted a drink, I carry a coin. I carry a silver dollar in my pocket. It's an 1880 silver dollar. I've carried it for years. And every time I wanted a drink, I would flip a coin. And if it was heads, I got to drink, I got to order my
There
cocktail.
you go. Yeah.
Tails, I had to drink a glass of water before I got to try again. So that was
Graham, you've now gone from Ted Lasso to Hopper to Two-Face out of Batman.
Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, it does not have 2 faces. There was a Tails on there, and I get it more often than you'd want.
I love it. So look, Jason,
Yeah.
you're our, well, I believe you to be our keen sales trainer, sales coach, right?
Yes.
The other day you were sharing how sales reps got effective training, more likely to have higher win rates, they're more likely to hit their quota, they're more likely to sell at a premium price, I think you said. And like the coach in me goes, well, yeah, right, yeah, of course, like obviously that's what happens, right? But then I sit in interviews, as I have done over the last few weeks, and I hear stories from these candidates who are talking about the fact that as the pressure is mounting on the KPIs and the micromanaging is increasing, the time for the training and the time for the coaching that once was there is getting ripped out of the schedule slowly but surely.
Right.
Because you've got to be more on the phones because we're not seeing the results.
Mhm.
What's your reflection on that? What's
It's
happening
actually, that's actually a really timely question because as I speak to you, one of the things I'm doing with my team with Incision is we're rebuilding the whole entire onboarding program. Because there was really no, this is not an indictment on the team, but there was really no defined path, right? You join, you go through training. The training could take 3 months, 4 months, then you're out in the field selling, but there was not a very prescriptive pathway. So right now, what we're building is like, I call it like a 3-phase approach to training. We do the pre-learning, so they're going to come on board. We're going to have them spend about a week doing some pre-learning through some tech stack that we have, some software that we have. Then they're going to go through the in-person / virtual training. Then there's this thing called everboarding, where the training always happens, right? It's constant learning that's happening. I call it like a sales enablement ecosystem where we kind of keep things going and going. But to answer your question, I 100% agree with everything you said, especially when I worked in my previous life in the medical device field. When a rep was hired, they may have a $5, $6, $7, $8 million annual number they have to hit. So they're in class on day one, on their phone, on their computer, on their iPad. And I'm going, why the hell are you doing this? You haven't been trained yet. Who the hell are you talking to? You haven't been trained how to talk to the product yet. But the manager that hired them is like, listen, I hired you because you know these people. So I need you out there, already laying the groundwork.
The Rolodex.
Right. Yeah. The Rolodex. Exactly right. And then the millennials go, what's a Rolodex? And we'll have another call on that later.
That's another webinar.
Yeah. Or I have a pager on my belt because I have to go to the phone and call someone that just called me. But the point is that there's an insurmountable amount of pressure on new hires when they come into the organization because they're expected to deliver right away. My job is to go, hold on a minute. We need them for 2 weeks, 3 weeks to get them trained. So we developed this 90-day competency model. So from day 1 to day 90, we're training them. At 90 days, they will be competent. They can go out and articulate the message. They can talk about the product. They've already had a couple calls. They've had some demos under their belt. And we're checking along the way. Day 30, midterm. Day 45, we're doing some coaching challenges. They're using Jiminy as an example. Shameless plug, sorry. But they're doing things along the way. Yeah, they're doing things along the way, and we're measuring their competency. But we have to have them for that time, because if we don't do that, and we go, you know what, you don't need to be trained, just go out in the field. Then what happens? They're not productive, they're not generating revenue, and then all of a sudden they're blaming me for not training them. Like, well, you told me to get them out. So you want us to train them, or do you want them out in the field? You tell me what you want. So that's a long-winded answer, but the bottom line is that you have to set expectations upward, up to the C-suite, and say, this is what you want, so this is what we're going to do. And fortunately, where I'm at right now in my current position with Cision, they've actually put that in some of our objectives to say, you know what, sales enablement is a top 5 objective for us. We want to make sure that we are onboarding our people the right way. We are putting things in place to ensure that they go through the process efficiently, but also competently.
No, I agree. And I totally agree. And when I hear these stories about it being that part of the week getting cut, it makes my blood boil a bit, because there's a part of me that goes, oh, so what is training and coaching then? Is that just for when things are going good? That's a nice thing to do when things are going well. Like, surely now, I know that one of our mores at Jiminy is we are doing more of it than ever, because it's harder, and we're in the office more. That's another one of our mores. I don't know how you guys reflect on this, but we're back to mandatory in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, because let's get in, let's learn together.
Well, I think the one thing I'll contribute, if you're open to it, is that we specifically, as we think about coaching, to your point.
Sure, yeah.
A lot of times what you'll see, and I'll be curious to hear what Graham and Chris have to say on this, you'll take a high-performing sales rep and say, you know what, you're amazing. We're going to promote you. You're going to be a manager of a sales team now. Well, just because they're a great sales performer doesn't mean they're a great coach or a manager. And what I've seen in my whole entire career is that we take these people that are high performing, that crush their quota quarter after quarter, we promote them to a manager of a team, and they're still selfish on themselves, not their teams. They're not coaching their team. They're not giving feedback. All they care about is, did you hit your number or not? They're not diagnosing if they did or what the why they didn't hit their number. They're not giving that feedback, to your point. So that's something that I'm working on with my team right now to make sure that we are providing a level of coaching training to the managers that manage new hires to make sure that they're actually getting in front of it and not behind it.
That's great. More of that. More great managers, please. That
Well,
would
we
be
have to
awesome.
have
Totally agreed, Jason.
That's how you lose people. I mean, you know,
No.
I haven't read data, but some attrition rates are over 20%. That's crazy. It costs more to fire someone than it does to hire someone.
Yeah, I mean, this one of the conversations I have a lot now with our BD team is on patience, right? Because of this idea that, and I'm going somewhere with this, because of this idea that, you know, I've got to get in, I've got to know my next step, and then my next step, and then my next step, and I'll be that for 3 months, and then I'll be this, and there's this lack of patience. And Simon Sinek talks about it. Actually, talks about, you know, you might have had like five jobs and 5 years working, but you've actually only got 12 months actual experience, because you've not committed, you've not got past the onboarding to the point where you've really understood what's happening, where you've really struggled. And so the value you offer is not there as an employee. The concern I have about that story, to your point, is what generation, therefore, of leaders are we building? If the patience isn't there to stick at themselves, how are they going to stick at others? Because let me tell you, that's dug at my patience bloody deep over the years. I can tell you.
But see, Shelly, that's the problem. We live in a Twitter world where everything has to be done in 140 characters or less.
Right, I know, but maybe now's the time for resetting. Maybe now's the time to reset a little.
The one thing
I think with it,
hires is to steal Simon Sinek from you. I actually showed them like the 5-minute like micro TED talk that he gives about start with why.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
Because like I want everyone to understand what that means.
Yeah. Okay. If anyone listening to this has never seen Simon Sinek's start with why, do that immediately. I'm sure they must have done, but
he's also got a good book called The Infinite Game, which is a really good read.
I love that.
But I was going to just add to.
Sorry, the other one's Malcolm Gladwell. You know, and the 10,000 hour rule. If you ever he wrote the Outliers. Read about the 10,000 hour rule, about how long it takes someone to master someone. It takes 10,000 hours. Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
That's all right. I think one responsibility leaders have around this is helping people better understand what it means, what motivation means, and also what often gets neglected as aspiration and inspiration. If you ask someone like what motivates them, typical sales reps will say money, financial freedom, buying a house, promotion, all these things. And a lot of those things are destinations, they're outcomes, and they're aspirations, they're not really motivations. Aspirations like your mountaintop, where do you want to go to, and you should have multiple ones. Inspiration is the footpath of, okay, how do you get there? I can see other people have got there. And motivation is, well, why do you want to do that? That kind of start with why, but motivation often comes from actions. Like action create motivation. Just like going for a run or going to the gym, you'll always feel motivated at the end of it. And a lot of the time we think we need to be motivated to act, but action can create it. So I think it's important to help your teams and people realize, like, what are your aspirations, and help them recognize it shouldn't just be about this one thing about a promotion, but what do you want to do as a result of it? Why do you want to get promoted? Like, what's the reasons behind it? What will you be able to do as a result of it? And help people understand more about those aspirations of the wider things, not just work related as well, and support them in becoming a better person, not just a better salesperson. And I suppose just a bit of a side note on that as well, I've seen a few companies doing internal programs, internal sort of future leader programs, where it's not saying, hey, by doing this, you're automatically going to become a manager, but it's more about, you're going to go on this course, and this is just as much about you working out, do you want to be a manager, as to also better understanding how you might be able to do that.
Yeah,
but there's no expectation at the end of it. That gives people the understanding and tools, and also gives the company, as your point, Jason, as well, like that confidence in that, you know, we've got the right kind of people here, and also gets them to clarify, actually, do you know what? I don't want to be a manager. That's okay. Maybe I just want to stay as an individual contributor.
100% agree with you on that one.
Yeah, I agree completely. What are you seeing, Chris? I mean, you've got a very specific lens through the mental health lens across, you know, a number of organizations. What are you noticing from your perspective?
I think there's a few things, I suppose, and there will be upbeat pieces to this, but I think the first thing is it's linked to something called social comparison theory. I know we talked about this the other day, where you've got upward social comparison in a healthy form is meant to be, oh, look how well everyone else is doing, I can get to that point. And you've got downward social comparison, which is, oh, look how much worse people are than me, I'm grateful for what I've got. But the dial gets turned up too much, that upward one becomes, oh my God, I'm never going to be as good as that person, I'm never going to get to that point. And therefore I'm impatient because I know all my friends are getting promoted or they're getting this and I'm here. And downward comparison is, oh, I see everyone else losing their jobs and I start to worry, even though I've got so much reassurance from my manager or my team that this could be me. And I think it's because now you've got LinkedIn, you've got all these social feeds where people are consuming more and more of this and not realizing the impact it's having on that primal brain of theirs that's sort of making it feel like this is the reality and this is the story from it. I think that's the first thing. I think also people are becoming more insular almost, of sort of thinking, well, who am I to complain? I've still got a job. Or, I'm earning good money, so why should I have this problem? My friend's been laid off, or my partner's been laid off, or someone else I know in the team. So who am I to have this problem? And couple that with survivor's guilt, you've got a lot of people, if they haven't got the right kind of support and avenue, bottling these things up, just thinking it's not for me to complain about this.
Yeah, and that in itself can have a real detrimental effect. How do you notice, or what's the right question? If we've got our teams, and maybe then it's not as obvious for some. Maybe there are those that are bottling it up and they're not sharing. Are there any signs as leaders we can be looking out for that maybe are struggling internally? They're not expressing it.
Yeah, I'll come to them. I think to caveat it, I think first of all is, and we've touched on it a couple of times, is rather than thinking, oh, I'll look out for signs and then we'll do something, is how do you work on this proactively?
Good point.
How do you address the elephant in the room, even from onboarding, and talk about all these things? If you're going to say, hey, here's the commission you can earn, here's the company's vision, it's also going, hey, you're probably going to feel like this at some point. Or after a few weeks in, when you get a lot of these no's, this is going to happen. And addressing those things so that people don't feel alienated when they do happen, and recognize that, this, my manager said I'd feel like this, so okay, versus no one else has talked about this, maybe I'm the odd one out. So therefore I can't talk to anyone, so I have to bottle it up, which means it comes out later on. So I think it's addressing the elephant in the room. It's being proactive with it. I know we talked about this the other day, Shelley, as well. It's, when people come in, you're like, right, here's a best practice week, or I know some people like as an SDR or BDR, here's what a good week of prospecting looks like. Here's how you should set yourself up. And I'll often speak to companies and go, do you have one for their mental well-being? And the answer is no. And it's a bit like going, well, hang on, if you're telling them here's how to perform, you should also be giving them something to give them an idea of how to take care of themselves. Talking about this more with less, it's if you're in Formula One team going, we want to go 2 or 3 seconds faster, you wouldn't stop there. You'd be thinking, right, okay, what effect is that going to have on the tires? How much fuel are we going to burn with that? How are we going to make sure we take care of the car so that it doesn't burn out? So it's thinking in that way. If you're increasing someone's target, if you're changing quota or whatever it might be, is do we have the best practice in place to support that person to be able to do this and give them that guidance? Because if we don't, they probably don't feel like they can come to us because we haven't raised it as a topic.
I absolutely adore that idea. Like, you just made me think about, I worked in a warehouse a long time ago, and the first thing they taught me was like how to pick up a box safely. It was like how to protect your body. Without the body, I can't do the physical part of the job. All we talk about in sales is bloody mindset. It's all we talk about. We love it. Mindset. But what are we actually doing as leaders to help support, develop, look after that mindset? And that idea, I just love. If I was a manager on my own, I'm gonna, after this, guys, we'll go to any questions from anybody. So it's just up to 10 to. If there's anyone listening to this thinking, oh, I really like the sound of that idea, but I'm already trying to be a leader, a coach, a mentor, now maybe as some kind of, counselor at times, I'm trying my best. And they want to create that kind of, playbook on this is how you should look after yourself here, your mental well-being. What advice would you give them? Where to go? I'm actually probably asking for myself. What should I do? I've got a blank bit of paper. Where do I start?
Yeah, well, I think it comes back to why this topic doesn't get brung up a lot, is that you don't have to have all the answers. And that's often what stops leaders from starting these conversations, is thinking, maybe they'll tell me something I don't know how to help them with, or, you know, they'll bring something up. I'm not a qualified therapist. And like, that's okay. You don't always have to be the answer. It doesn't mean there's anything less of you. It's also, you don't have to be the answer, but you can help them find the answer. But it's better to get it out there. It's like, you know, what you'd say to a rep is saying, hey, look, they might ask questions you don't understand. It might be for the pre-sales team. It might be for the solutions architect. That's all right. But at least get the question out so you know who to bring in. And it's the same thing with there. So I think having that mindset, first of all. I think secondly, ask the team, you know, ask people, what are some of the things you're doing at the moment? If it's a remote team as well, like, what are some things that work for you in taking care of yourself? Let's have a bit of a session on that, just so you can get an idea from other people on it and explain, this is what we're looking to do. This is what we want to build. We want to provide something, because, you know, particularly when people are working remotely, they'll think, well, I can't go out for lunch because, you know, what happens if someone slacks me or messages me, or I can't. It's, people find it harder to take breaks when they're on their own because they don't have that kind of, they're not mirroring anyone else's behavior. If you said, oh, on a Monday when you're working from home, you know, best thing to do, try and get a walk in like mid-morning or something. Straight away they're like, oh wow, I've got that permission, I've got that guidance, I feel a lot less guilty doing that from there. So I think asking people, getting those insights, and then I think just as a leader, thinking about asking better questions. I think this comes back to Jason's point earlier on, when people are promoted too soon. But leaders will always encourage their teams to ask better questions, but think, are you asking better questions to your team? Asking someone, how are you, is a very generic question. You'll get a very generic answer. People will often think you're just asking it for the sake of it. So, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, how have you been feeling recently? Or how are you managing with the cost of living crisis at the moment? Or how are you coping with this situation? And just being more specific. Allowing people to open up more.
That bit you said there about permission as well, I think is I can totally relate. And I think another way of offering that permission as leaders is by setting the example, the standard. So for example, if we're the leaders that are off, but constantly checking in, what message does that send in terms of what we think matters when we're off? It sends the message that we should always be slightly on.
Yeah,
you know.
And just a final message on that as well, using schedule send, it's so simple. I know people put in their messages, oh, this is one for Monday, or at the footer, right at the end when you've read the whole thing, I work differently to you, so don't feel like you have to reply. Someone has already consumed all that information, their brain has already switched onto it. Just put schedule send. I'm not saying if you work better on weekends, don't. Still work, but just schedule it to come out on Monday. Don't send something with that caveat. It's good intentions, but it defeats the object.
Agreed. Fab. Oh, love this. This is my first webinar. Did I tell you guys that? So much fun. Right, I think we're going.
No, Shelley.
Really?
Yeah, you're doing a killer job.
Like a pro. Have we got any
scale
questions?
from 1 to 10, how do you feel
yeah.
like you're doing? But you can't use the number 7.
Who said that?
No, that's my question for you. How do you feel like you're doing on the webinar? A scale from 1 to 10, but you can't use the number 7.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Sorry. Why can't I use the number 7?
Because that's what everybody answers.
Why?
I don't know, but people do. And it forces you to answer either 6 or 8.
So therefore, most people answer 6 or 8?
Yeah, but it's really on a scale between 6 and 8, how are you doing?
I love it. Well,
that goes to Chris's question about 1 to 10. That's somebody told me that trick a long time ago, and it really forces people, because it's so easy to just say 7, and 7 is nothing.
Oh, so
I think even when people do.
Sorry, go on. I was just going to say, so I'm sort of interpreting that as the sort of like, you know, from poor to excellent, okay, fair, good. It's like the middle, it's like the safety zone where I'm not like saying I'm really great, I'm not saying I'm really bad, I'm just kind of like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now I don't actually want you to, you don't have to answer the
Well,
question.
I'm definitely a 9, so it's fine. I'm not 6 or an 8.
I love that.
Have we got any questions? Where would they be?
I think they would be in the Q&A at the bottom there.
Q&A, let's have a look.
Pop
No,
up.
there's none. There's anyone have we not got anyone live with us? No. Oh yes, we have.
We have.
Some people.
While we're waiting for questions, Shelley, I can just build on that as well, actually.
Go on, you go for it.
I think it's also exploring, if someone says, sometimes people might think it's a trick question and say 8, 9 or 10, and acknowledging it and going, what makes it an 8, 9 or 10? And then asking them, okay, do you still feel like that would be, or if it was an 8, what would make it a 10?
Yeah.
Or if someone says, because what you can do with these kind of questions is someone might come back a couple of weeks later and say, oh, I'm a 7, or now I'm a 5, and you start going, oh, actually they're going down a little bit. So it's going, well, you said you were an 8 a few weeks ago. Like, what's changed? What are you doing differently? What's happened as a result? And often you'll find, when people start to feel overwhelmed at work, not much has changed, but they probably start neglecting the things outside of work that often help them manage that.
That feel better.
That kind of taps to relieve that pressure. It's just helping people become more self-aware. So it's a really good way for you to better understand and become more aware, and also someone to feel like they can talk about these things, but also to increase their levels of self-awareness.
What you've just remembered. Oh, sorry, go on.
I'll often ask people, this was more in interviews. When I was interviewing SDRs, I would ask, now, this isn't perfectly analogous, but I would say, like, on your team of 10 at your last job, where did you rank? And usually they'd say like number 3 or whatever. And I'd say, okay, why weren't you number 1? And they would tell me why they weren't number 1. And then I'd say, okay, why weren't you number 10? And the same thing goes for this, like, how are you feeling from 1 to 10? Okay, why aren't you feeling a 1? And that allows people to tell you, like, what's going well, what is going well in their life, what is going, like, what does make them happy, what do they care about? And the same for, okay, well, why aren't you a 10? Well, that's the aspirational things that they're looking for in the future that you can help them get.
I think one thing just to mention there is, when I always speak to people, is when it comes to the mental well-being side of things, trying to avoid why questions, because why questions can come across as a bit accusational and can sometimes make someone feel they've got to defend themselves. Like, why are you feeling like that? Yeah. So it's more like what questions rather than why. Questions are great for, like, why do you want to achieve this? The Simon Sinek piece, but it's getting someone to go, look, I'm not questioning your judgment here. You don't have to sort of, present your case to me here. I just want to better understand it. If I said, why have you done that? Why have you sent that email? Why are you feeling like this? It's almost like, oh, I feel like, oh, I can't really be honest with you now, but what are the reasons you're feeling like this? Straight away just feels less sort of accusational.
No, that's super helpful. I have a bunch of one-on-ones today, so I'm going to use these. I'm going to use these questions. Better, the why questions. Better for interviews where I am trying to find out how good somebody is at a job, and worse for one-on-ones where you're trying to mental health.
Good stuff, guys. Well, listen, there isn't any questions, so clearly we answered everything today for everyone. We did such a good job. I really appreciate you joining me today, Chris, Graham, Jason. Thank you so much for joining in on the chat. And who knows, we might do another one soon. Hey, we've got to do one about pages and what was the other thing we talked about? Pages and
Rolodexes.
Yeah.
Pages and Rolodexes, old school. I did a post this week about whiteboards. I'm going right old school. Not sure.
Shelley, I've got a little proverb related to your point at the start, if you want me to share it at the end.
Absolutely. Go on. Let's end on this.
The Chinese farmer proverb, and some people might have heard this on a podcast recently, but the story goes, there's a son and his father who are radish farmers, and the father's got quite old now, he's bedbound, and one day the son has got one horse, they're turning over the field, and the horse bolts and runs over the field. And the son's like, oh God, we're screwed. Don't know what to do. Runs in, tells his dad. His dad goes, I don't know what this is yet, I can't call it. And his son thinks, well, you've lost your marbles, what's going on here? A few days later, the son's hasn't slept much. He sees the horse reappear with 30 other horses over the hill, and they come back into the farm. And he's like, we're going to be rich. We're in the horse business now. We don't need to sell radishes anymore. Runs in, tells his dad, we're going to be rich. This is amazing. He goes, I don't know what this is yet. I can't call it. A few days later, the son's trying to domesticate these horses, and one of them kicks out and shatters his knee. And this is 14th century China, so he's not getting a knee replacement. Sort of crawls back into the house and like, Dad, we're screwed. I don't know what's going to happen now. How are we going to earn money? And the dad goes again, I don't know what this is. I can't call it. A few days later, the army come along for conscription saying, look, we need to enroll your son into the army. And they say, well, we can't. Look, he's shattered his knees. The army ride off into the distance and everyone dies in that battle. And the kind of moral of that story is, like, we're very quick sometimes, as you mentioned at the start, to sort of label things as even if it's like a bad day, a week, a quarter, or a month. And it's just avoiding making those judgments, because sometimes when you do, you can call things too soon and almost sort of give up on thinking of ways around it. It's not saying never celebrate the wins, but it's also just, recognize what you did to get there, and don't get too carried away with those moments that maybe do feel like a bit of a downturn, because there's no reason. And the beauty of sales is that the next day can't be one of the best days of your lives.
Love it. Thank you. That was the perfect way to end, Chris. Thank you for sharing that. That was brilliant. Love it. Any more proverbs, then send them my way. I love a proverb.
I'm not going to try to follow that up.
No, Graham, Jason, don't say a thing. Right, guys. Thank you so much.
Great to meet you, Graham and Jason, as well.
Likewise.
See you soon.
Thanks,
Bye,
y'all.
guys.
See you next week, Shelley.